Time to start the show.
I'm panicking.
Don't panic. Let's all.
No, I'm not panicking. I'm too tired and too old.
Okay, let's do this then. Hey, I'm Raymond. You're watching RPadTV 3000, and I'm joined by two excellent people that went from video game professionals to become excellent book authors. On the top is John Foster, coming from New York. He's a longtime PR professional, and underneath him is John Robinson, who a lot of you know from IGN. You might know him as Johnny Ballgame, J Rob. So I guess I got J Fo and J Rob. I'm gonna have to use their last names. I did not think that.
Didn't think it through. Yeah,
did not think it through. So I would love to hear how you guys went from video game professionals to authors. Mr. Foster, why don't you go first?
Sure. I stumbled into doing public relations for video games. That wasn't my intent when I went out to Los Angeles. It was the entertainment industry, and screenwriting was my intent. And my first PR job I picked up because a producer that I was working for, a very small company, he just laid us all off. He was independently wealthy. He wanted to take a break. So he laid us all off. So we were kind of fucked. And I knew a woman who had just started her own PR firm. She said, "You want to come answer phones?" And I said, "Sure," because I needed money. And 6 months later, I was an account executive. And then I just sort of, kept jumping in. And the further my career progressed in public relations, the more it became about gaming, or things that fit in very well with the gaming lifestyle. Like Playboy Home Entertainment wasn't terrible, to go alongside video games. So I had always intended to have writing as my focus, and it just sort of took a back seat for a long time. And it wasn't really until I moved to New York and I said, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to gamble and write novels, I need to do it now. And my wife was super supportive. She was then my girlfriend. And she's an audiobook narrator, so she gets it all. And so I just started doing it, and I was very lucky to start. I mean, I really drilled down and worked hard, but I was lucky to start placing short stories. And then The Unheard Of, my first novel, sold. And so, from there, then I was just, I should keep doing this. So that was sort of the transition.
So I think you're underselling your video game career a bit, because you worked for Bender Helper Impact
for a long time. Yeah.
Giant PR firm, really respected in the video game business. And you were, if I'm not mistaken, weren't you like a VP or something there?
I was. Yeah. I was a vice president there. And I actually worked my way up from senior account executive to vice president there.
Wow.
And Dean and I are still in touch, which is nice. We always had a great relationship. But yeah, I was fortunate. I was able to inherit and put together a great team with people like Natalie, you remember, and Lindsay and all those. And they were just, really fun, smart, energetic people. And, I had a lot of free reign from Dean to do crazy things. Like, the boxing events that we did in Vegas.
I won one of those.
You did one. Wasn't it? Didn't you beat up Tommy Tallarico?
I did beat up Tommy. That's right. But in the finals, it was me and Ryan McDonald from GameSpot, who actually boxes.
Didn't he dislocate his shoulder though?
Yes. So I'm in the ring with Ryan, thinking, okay, he's gonna kick my ass.
Yeah.
And then he throws a punch, and I block it, and I hear this wet snap, and he starts like keeling over. And my first thought is like, should I hit him?
Follow him down.
It's a boxing match. I hope you hit him.
I did not. He dislocated his shoulder, and I won by default.
Right.
He was gonna kick my ass.
He broke himself on your amazing defense.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we did that. We did that event. We did the 2 boxing events with no insurance.
Oh,
So yeah. So we kind of just pulled those together and winked and nodded at a couple of things. You were not on the Assassin 2015 event, were you? Where I kidnapped some people and put them in helicopters.
What? No.
We hired strippers to be commandos, and we kidnapped some people. It was like Doug Lombardi was there. Can't remember who else was there. I think Chris Hudak was there. It was only like 6 people because the game was not that great, and so we had to do something really fun, and we did it, and that was a lot of fun. But it was another one of those crazy. We won't tell everyone at home exactly what we're doing.
Yeah. I do want to talk about some of the crazy events that you did, but before that, let's hear John Robinson's story of how he became one of the most respected editors at IGN and to become an author. Now, your path seemed a little obvious, but then you took a really unexpected turn lately. So let's hear that story, John.
Oh, I mean, basically, I was a creative writing major in college at San Francisco State. And while I was in college, I got an internship at GamePro magazine. So that's how, Johnny Ballgame was born. And I was writing articles. They were paying me freelance money. GamePro paid for me to finish college and then promoted me to associate editor as soon as I graduated. So, I was living the life, right? Like, I was like, man, I'm getting paid to play video games and write about it. It was amazing. I kind of worked there for a while. Went to a couple other places. Insight magazine for a little bit, where we had a WWE column with The Rock. So I used to ghostwrite some of The Rock's articles with him.
Oh, cool.
Back in the day. Went to IGN, started IGN Sports, went to ESPN, wrote for ESPN the magazine for about 6 or 7 years, I think. But while I was at, IGN, we'd go on these WWE events to go to WrestleMania. And I always wanted to write a wrestling book because I was like, man, WWE puts out a bunch of books, but they all kind of suck. And I was like, yo, I could totally do a better job than what was coming out, right? So basically, I don't know if you guys kind of know about WWE, but it's kind of run like the mob, right? So I was like, how am I going to Donnie Brasco my way into WWE and, start writing books for them? So we're at WrestleMania, and after one of the events, I get in a limousine with a bunch of WWE execs, and I basically sat next to the guy who was in charge of publishing and sat there and was like, hey, your books suck. I'm a writer. I could do better. Let me write for you. And
were those the exact words? That conversation sounds awesome.
More or less. I was like, hey, this is who I am. And someone from WWE was like, yo, this is Johnny Ballgame. Like he knows Rock. He's hanging out with D-Lo and playing video games. Like, you should talk to this guy. So he got my card, and then I didn't hear shit for like 9 months. I was like, oh, they probably don't want anything to do with me, whatever. And then all of a sudden I get a call, and they're like, hey, we're looking for someone to write a book. An editor from Simon & Schuster is going to call you, see if you're interested. So I talked to her. Of course, I was interested. One book led to two. Two books led to, hey, write a book about the Attitude Era, since all these guys, because I used to play video games with them. I still talk to D'Lo Brown all the time. Mark Henry, a lot of those guys that I used to just, hang out in the back and play Mortal Kombat with and Madden. So wrote the Attitude Era book, wrote the Ultimate Warrior book, which was crazy because I wrote a book on NXT, and then I wrote Creating the Mania, about like the behind the scenes of how they create WrestleMania. And then, you know, it's kind of crazy because the Ultimate Warrior book actually won like an award. I have like a trophy. It won like best biography, and I was like, "Whoa, how did a WWE book start winning awards? Like, that's insane to me." And you know, from there, I was kind of like, I love writing. I love fiction, so I want to write, a novel. So I had this idea about. I kept hearing about people going geocaching. And so I had this idea of like a girl going geocaching, like punching the coordinates and stumbling upon like a werewolf den. And so that's kind of how the book started. And, it's based on my daughter. So she's kind of sassy and talks a lot of shit. And,
Where did she get that from, John?
I have no idea. So yeah, sunshine and the full moon.
Okay, I got it too.
But yeah, it's been a wild ride. It's fun, and it's crazy that it all started with me just getting in the limousine.
That's right, and now you're gonna be like, this is the next Twilight. I don't know if that's true. No, this is the first sunshine in the full moon. It's better.
Let's hope for Twilight numbers.
Yeah.
Yes, I can't wait. When you get the movie deal, can I be an extra or background actor? That's what you're supposed to call them now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so the book actually just got optioned. It is happening.
Oh wow!
So
that's great.
Yeah. That's amazing.
I mean, we'll see. Now, from option to movie. I mean, that's another whole thing onto itself. But hey, the first step has been taken. I just was reading the screenplay, and it's cool.
That's great.
I am serious about being an extra, though. I'm trying to beef up my IMDb page.
I just hope I could be an extra. What are you talking about?
Actually, I have 3 things. I have 3 things on my page, and a friend of mine has 6, and I'm trying to catch.
Oh, did Ray get frozen?
I think he froze.
For anyone else.
Are you there?
I am back.
Oh my God, he's there.
Whoa, did that pop out? We had a technical glitch. We're going back to John Foster. Let's talk about your book.
This book? I think Ray froze again.
That's all right. I want to know. So tell me about Rooster, man. I'd love to hear about it.
I'll tell you about it. It actually it started when I was out in LA, and I was still. It was the 90s, and I had when I went out there to write screenplays, I had never seen a screenplay before or seen Los Angeles before. So I just kind of went out there, and when you're 20, you're full of confidence and not a lot of intelligence. So that's how I did it. So I wrote 2 screenplays that no one cared about, and I finally, I was driving one night, and then that's when Alice in Chains' song "Rooster" was in big rotation on the radio, and I didn't have air conditioning, so I would drive with my windows down, so I couldn't hear any of the lyrics, so I didn't really know that it was actually about his father in Vietnam and all that stuff. All I could hear was the refrain, those incredible guitars. And, they've come to snuff the rooster. He ain't never going to die. And I would hear that because they played the song all the time. And this image of this guy was just in my head. And I decided to just write this balls to the wall screenplay, no hesitation whatsoever. And that got me my first manager. And then they set me up at Innovative Artists and with an agent. And my very first agent, I'm sitting there just, practically wetting my pants. I'm so nervous. And he walks into the conference room and he looks at me and his first words were, "You're sick." So that's how it started. And, but then, my PR career was taking off at the same time. So I put way too much. If I was going to be a writer, I needed to put less time into PR and more time into writing. But I did not do that. So Rooster kind of fell by the wayside. And when I got to New York and I started really focusing on writing, and I sold several horror novels, and the two main genres that are my favorite are horror and sort of crime noir. Primarily because those are the genres where I think you have the most risk for the protagonist. You don't know if they're going to live or going to die, and they're usually making bad decisions. And I thought, you know what, I really want to write a crime novel, and I think I could adapt Rooster from the perspective of a guy, several decades later, rewrite it as a novel, and I did, and I'm really, really pleased with it.
Now, I'd love to hear about your guys' influences. John Foster, I know you're a big Stephen King guy.
Yes.
John Robinson, who are the writers, or what works inspire you or have shaped your writing?
Yeah. It's gonna sound like weird, but I really studied a lot of like poetry and short stories. Like Langston Hughes, someone like that has always been like one of my favorite. I go back to the classics. I love Stephen King. I think everybody loves Stephen King. I also read a lot of sports books. I'm, huge baseball fan. So I read a lot of like biographies. So I think that's why I like, the character in the book. Like I like writing in first person, maybe because I like reading so many biographies.
And Mr. Foster's, we talk about Stephen King a lot. Who else?
Yeah. Well, I mean, geez, there's so many damn people. One of the writers that I'm very fond of today is Megan Abbott.
Okay.
And she's had a couple of her books adapted into TV shows, or at least one. There's a show called Dare Me. She's an amazing writer of sort of crime and sort of, very dark mystery thriller stories. But, writers like Neil Gaiman, he's fantastic. Shirley Jackson is a huge influence. Joe Lansdale is one of my favorites. I don't know if you know Joe Lansdale, but he's one of those guys that just real mellow, laid back guy from East Texas, and he can write anything. He can write horror, he can write westerns, he can write crime novels, he can write these sort of funny crime novels he has with these two guys named Hap and Leonard. And actually that was just a series for a couple seasons. So those are big influences. It sort of balances back and forth between horror and crime, and Richard Matheson, Peter Straub, those are big names that really influenced me a lot.
So John Robinson, you've written your first, I guess, would you classify this as a young adult novel, or how would you classify this?
Yeah, I mean, that's because the character is 14, they throw it in young adult. But she swears a lot. There's a lot of danger. You kind of think of like, Stranger Things type.
Okay.
You wouldn't necessarily say it's for kids, but kids like it. It's the fun thing. So yeah, it's young adult. There's werewolves.
You start branching out to anywhere else, or?
I have no idea what you said, but are you saying you kept freezing? Sorry.
No worries. I just want to know are you going to continue with this genre, or do you see yourself branching out to anything else?
Yeah, you know what? There's a sequel that I have in mind already with the character, kind of continuing, and I've been getting a lot of like fan mail, which is cool. People hit me up saying they love the character and want to see what happens next with Sunshine. So that's always a good thing, right? When people want to see more, So the next one, Sunshine and Eternal Darkness, it's coming. So just working on it.
That's awesome.
Also means there'll be more movies.
Hopefully, man.
This is totally going Twilight. I'm going to be like, once I knew John Robinson.
Twilight or Shades of Grey, or 50 Shades of Grey. Sorry.
Those are very, very different things. But
yeah,
I'll be an expert in either of those.
Right.
So you could just do 50 Shades of Twilight and make billions of dollars.
That's right.
So do you guys miss being full time in the video game business, or are you totally content doing what you're doing now? I mean, I know Mr. Robinson still does work in there, but not like it was in your IGN days.
Oh,
yeah, you go first.
I work full time doing PR at Koei Tecmo.
But it's not the same.
What's that?
It's not the same, and that's like a grown-up job.
It is a grown-up job. Yeah, I'm not going out boxing other journalists or anything like that. But it's great. It's a lot of fun, and it's interesting to go like from covering video games to being behind the scenes and actually working at a publisher. And
Right.
I love a lot of our games. We've got Neo, Dead or Alive. Always been big into fighting games. The old classic Ninja Gaiden, Tecmo Bowl. We have a lot of like the classics, Rygar, that I grew up playing, and now I'm heading up the PR for these franchises. So it's very cool.
John Foster, do you miss working in video game PR?
There's a lot of the work that I don't miss that was just a real pain in the ass. What I miss is getting to travel around the country the way I got. I mean, the job afforded me so much travel. And so I got to go to San Francisco and Chicago and Detroit and New York and sometimes other places. And I had more friends in other cities than I had in Los Angeles. And so every time that I was on the road for press tours, for me, it was just a blast. We were going to talk video games, and then I got to see my friends, and we'd go out and on expense account and cause some trouble. But I really missed that aspect. I missed the social aspect because I met so many really cool people. You're surrounded by so much creativity and stimulation in the video game business.
Right.
It's just really cool it's a great environment to be around. It's just a neat environment. So that I miss. That I do miss.
Right. We were
the
talking
thing
about
too
that.
is like when I was at IGN, when I was at ESPN, when I was Johnny Ballgame at Game Pro, like I had the best of both worlds because not only was I writing about video games, but I was writing about sports and sports games. And I was interviewing like basically the people that I grew up watching or that I was fans of. Like, it's insane to me that I get to sit down with Mike Tyson or Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods and spend like multiple sessions with them. Become friends with the different athletes that I still talk to. It's crazy that I would just sit down and play Madden against an NFL player, and then that was my job. I'd write a story about it. Like I can't believe I conned people for so long into paying me to do this job.
Yeah, I had a similar thing, and this wasn't a video game client, but one of my sort of adjacent clients was I don't know if you remember Pride Fighting Championships.
Oh yeah.
At the time, they were bigger than the UFC, and so they were my client. And so I got to take journalists over to Tokyo, and then in LA, introduce them. So I got to for a photo shoot, I got to roll briefly with Hoist Gracie. He picked me up upside down and said, "Look at this guy. He's trying to break my arm." He just held me there. And then in Japan, it was the same thing. It's Boss Rutan, who was a former UFC heavyweight champion of a bunch of things. He was a commentator at that time. Friendliest, craziest guy you've ever met in your life. So I got to work out with, super fucking funny. He was hilarious. And so friendly and welcoming. And yeah, on one entire flight back from Tokyo, he was several rows behind me and had one of those fucking laser pointers. And I'm trying to read, and he kept doing it all over my damn book.
That's excellent.
He actually,
he was in that movie Here Comes the Boom.
I think he was, with Kevin.
The King of Queens. What's his name?
Kevin James. Yeah,
Kevin James. Yes. So, and I tweeted Boss Rutan because I thought he was hilarious in that movie. I'm like, when's your next movie coming on? I think you're really funny and should do more comedy. And he mentioned that he had a small role coming, but I don't think I ever said Hey, and speaking of which, someone on Twitch just mentioned that Boss Rutan was great in that Kevin James movie.
I'm not surprised because he's such a natural storyteller. He's the funniest, but also most dangerous person that I've ever personally interacted with in my life. If you ever roll with him, it's like every single part of his body hurts you. Like his ribs are touching your ribs, and your ribs hurt.
So I remember. Do you remember? I forgot which company did the UFC games. I think it was like Dream something. Totally don't remember.
I don't remember.
Is this before THQ?
Yeah, it was before THQ, probably like 2001, 2002, around then. It was a smaller publisher, but we went out. It ended up being the PR guy and Chuck Liddell and me. And Chuck couldn't have been nicer. And I was totally like goofing on him too, because he's from San Luis Obispo. And so is Weird Al Yankovic. Talking to him at dinner, I'm like, what's it like being the second most famous man from San Luis Obispo? Do you ever get tired of living in Weird Al's shadow? And he was just absolutely chill. And I told him as we were ending dinner, I'm like, dude, you're not at all what I thought you'd be like. You're funny and chill and relaxed. And he said, you know, I can kill most men alive with my bare hands. I don't have a whole lot to be angry about. So
to me, that's Brock Lesnar. Like, you know, sit down, talk to Brock, and I was like, bro, like your hands are so big, you can just like snatch my neck and kill me right now. And he's like, yeah, I probably could, you know. But yeah, he's a chill guy.
What's it like hanging out with Brock? Does he really have that farmer thing going on?
He was wearing a suit and tie when I talked to him. Like,
oh, wow.
he was like very dressed. It's funny because, you know, I've been able to talk to him when he was in UFC, when he was in WWE, and then back when he was in WWE again. So, you know, to kind of see his evolution, I guess I just missed out talking to him when he tried out for the Vikings. But he did get in Madden, I think.
Nice.
He was a very large human being.
Oh, huge, yeah.
Extremely. I remember I was in an event with you in LA, John Robinson. Big Show was there at the Superstar Challenge. And I remember shaking Big Show's hand. And it was like sticking my hand in a turkey. Pretty big hand.
Yes. Yeah. He's enormous. It's like awe-inspiring to see some of these guys. Just like you see them on TV. To me, a lot of the NBA guys are like that because you lose perspective when you watch TV. You don't realize that, like, oh wow, like Steph Curry looks small on TV because everybody else is, you know, 7 feet tall around him. But then you meet Steph Curry and he's taller than you, and you're like, wow, like, how are you so tall? Like, I didn't think you were that big.
I used to work out at Gold Gym in Venice, and so there were some very, you know, big people there. I remember I was doing my little tricep press downs once, and I looked over, and on the other one was The Rock, and it was like, I think just the bones in his arm were bigger than my thighs, you know, let alone the muscles. And then Magic Johnson, you know, long after his career was in there, and he's a giant. You know, he was just a giant human being.
No, we're talking about video game events before, and John Foster, you've thrown some crazy ones. John Robinson, you've been to a ton. What are some of the most memorable or craziest events in your video game career that you can think of?
Honestly, man, I think I missed out on the crazy things. I went to a lot of the big events, you know, like Madden Bowl and Superstar Challenge, and I think the sporting events, like where they would just fly me and I'd go interview athletes and then I'd leave. I never got to fight other journalists like you guys are talking about, or I think it would have been fun, but you know, I never got the chance. I think I hit a weird period because when I started GamePro, like I said, I was an intern. So they didn't really send me a lot of places. I was just like writing reviews of games, you know, being in the office. And then when they finally promoted me, you know, I was doing like hot at the arcade. So I'd go to like arcade shows or I'd go to Golfland or whatever and do strategy guides for Tekken or Mortal Kombat and that type of thing. And then like, yeah, you know, ESPN, I was doing a lot of athlete interviews and, you know, just talking smack and playing NBA 2K or Madden or NBA Jam. But yeah, I didn't go to. I heard a lot about these crazy events from other people, but I don't know. Fortunately or unfortunately, I didn't get to partake.
I think.
How about you, Mr. Foster?
Well, you know, the thing is that with, you know, if you're doing, you know, a big Konami game or Sony or something like that, you've got the budget for these giant things, and if you're working with a smaller publisher, it's harder to get attention. So you have to come up with something, you know, that's a little more out of the box, and then find a way to justify it sort of thematically. So it's not just, yeah, we're going to go do this crazy thing. So like with the boxing, the whole thing that with the Mike Tyson boxing game was that it was a more technical game with regard to the sport than I think it was Knockout Kings was the big giant game at the time.
Yeah.
So our theory was we would actually go to Sugar Ray Leonard's gym and all of us get instruction for an hour or so and then fight a tournament. And then we would go back to the hotel with what we've learned, except for Ryan, who had to go get his shoulder fixed. But we'd go back to the hotel and redo the tournament on the video game with food and alcohol. But we had, I don't know if you remember, there's a company called Sammy Entertainment. And their presence in the US was real small at the time that I was working with them. They were really nice people, and they would kind of do anything. So we had some sort of a fighter plane game or something like that. And we set up this cool thing where there was like basically a trailer set up to be like a really cool bachelor pad video game sort of thing, like for like a trailer truck. And we took it out outside of Vegas to an airfield where they did skydiving. And we all did tandem skydiving. And then everyone got their one-on-one demo in the trailer. So that might be the craziest thing, that we actually had journalists jump out of planes from 10,000 feet, which, you know, has the potential to go wrong, but nobody died. Everyone had a lot of fun, and everyone did it, which was great. Nobody chickened out, even though I thought I was going to barf flying up, because I'm afraid of heights. But it's like, whose idea was this? This is a terrible idea.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was at IGN, they had a lot of crazy events that people would come back and talk about, you know, like going away, like doing like army training, like overnight, and they'd have like military people, like they would spend the night in, you know, some forest and had to do some kind of training. To like helicopter trips, and I don't know, like it was pretty crazy what people got away with and the amount of money that was spent. Especially companies like Midway. Like, you want to know why Midway went broke? Man, you hear about some of these events where they would be like, hey, we rented out, you know, an entire hotel to show these 10 games, you know, in Vegas or whatever. Like, it's insane.
Yeah, and that was, I always wished I had those clients, because then I would have had those budgets to work with. Like, let's fly 50 people to Hawaii. Right. So I always had to come up with something a little weirder. And Vegas was real easy for us to get to from LA, but it was I think it was an exciting time, sort of like the late 90s, early aughts was a really fun time, or maybe mid-late 90s, because everything was still kind of Wild West. You know, it seems like it was just wilder, and certainly on the journalism side, you know, things were just exploding and crazy, and you know, the online journalism presence was so new. I remember having my first meeting at GameSpot when they hadn't fully finished, like, even their offices. I don't know if you guys remember a guy named Ron Doolin. Yeah. So Ron, really nice guy. And the first time I met him, it turns out that he had pulled an all-nighter, and he had slept a few hours in a cabinet. There were like these low cabinets along the wall with doors. So he had crawled inside the empty cabinet, closed the door, slept for a couple of hours, and then came back out to keep working. So that was just kind of a fun crazy time to be working in the gaming business.
Oh yeah, when I first started IGN, I remember like a company coming, and we went into the game room where people would demo the preview builds, and one of the editors had full on like pajamas, and he was asleep on the couch, at 9 a.m, and like it turns out he had been like sleeping there, and people didn't know. Like, what is going on?
Dave? Was that Dave? That was.
I don't want to say who it was, but yeah, it's pretty crazy to like think that people are sleeping in the office, and there's a lot of weird things going on.
I mean, those days are over, right? Like the crazy events, the somewhat irresponsible spending. Like, did the business grow up?
I'll leave that to John.
Yeah, I mean, I think now, especially with COVID, I mean, no one's doing anything.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So, travel's completely out the window now. I think things are so much based on, TGS or E3 and different like bigger kind of conferences. Right. And then kind of branching out into like smaller things like, anime festivals and different things like that. I don't know. Personally, I haven't been able to throw a big budget, crazy event as a PR person. We kind of watch our money and try to be smart with it. I mean, as fun as THQ and Midway events were, where they blew millions of dollars in a weekend, what happened to those companies, right? Like,
yeah,
they don't exist.
So you're not gonna let us do like a live action Dynasty Warriors where we all have swords and put like 50 of us in a field, we all have swords, and just see what happens. I think it would be great. I'll sign a death.
Like John was saying, like, back then they were doing events and not even having insurance, and people are jumping out of planes and fighting each other. Like,
yep, no insurance.
That's insane. Like,
yeah. Well, and it sounds like the business has matured some, because that was not, being outside of it, I can say there was some recklessness involved, but being inside it at the time, it was kind of like, I have this to work with, and this is my objective, and this is how I'm going to get there. Let's throw the dice. Let's do the best we can to, keep everyone inside the rails, but if we break,
well, it's funny because like obviously I didn't go to that event, but I heard about it, and that's like one of the infamous events in video games, because like people came back and were talking about like who kicked each other's ass and who got knocked out or whatever. And I don't know, like I wish there was more video of that event, because I would have loved to seen the fights, because the stories just kept growing and growing about
what there is video. I have a VHS tape from that event, but it's not digitized, so I'll get it converted.
If you can get it converted, I'd love to see that, because I can't imagine that it was very good.
What, the boxing? It was shit.
Yeah. What was funny is I remember that there'd be some people that you're thinking, no, this is not going to be a good person. I remember there's a guy named Steve Kent, who's another guy who's writing now full time.
But he boxed.
He boxed Golden Gloves in Hawaii when he was a kid, and I had no idea.
He's like picking like journalists apart over there.
He's like a mild-mannered, older, really friendly guy, but then all of a sudden he's in the ring. He's the Mormon assassin.
Yeah, he kept trapping his opponent's jab hand. What happened?
You know what it was? So I fought Ryan McDonald in the semifinals, and I had Steve Kent in the finals. But we had run out of time, so we didn't have time for another match. And I beat him in rock, paper, scissors. That's how the event ended. Otherwise, he would have kicked my.
Were there even weight classes or anything, or it was just all every man form stuff?
I fought Tommy Tallarico. I'm like 3 of him.
Well, we did it twice. The first time we did it, we had like 8 people, and then they came up with a second Mike Tyson boxing game, so we did it again. But I had heard for so many journalists that were kind of irritated that I hadn't invited them. So we had, I don't know, 16 people come to the next one. So we made a very weak attempt at weight classes, but not really.
I lost in the second one. John Robinson, can you guess who I lost to? Coworker of yours, old coworker of yours.
Well, I know who went, so it was probably either Doug Perry or Aaron Boulding, but I would say you probably lost to Doug.
It was Doug.
Yeah.
And
Because,
see,
like I said, these stories went around the office. Everybody talked about it. So it's just funny to hear.
And I remember fighting Doug because in between the first event and the second event, I had actually started training in boxing. So I wasn't good, but I was quite a bit better. Except I never knew how to fight lefties, and Doug is lefty.
He's a lefty. Yeah.
I kept walking into his punches. I'm like, no, that's not it. That's not it.
How you gonna lose some guys like 60 years old?
That's not Doug. That's his wife. No.
Ow.
Doug's not watching this.
The thing was also my philosophy, this was selfish, but also just was how I worked with my teams was, we're working in a business that's about having fun, with games. And as much as we can, let's make it fun. I mean, if we're all just and sometimes, I'd run into PR people that were just dour motherfuckers. I'm like, why are you in this business? You are the wrong person to be doing this. Have some freaking enthusiasm. This is a fun thing we're doing. Look at this crazy shit. We're talking about John just going backstage and playing Madden. And it's like, that's your job, man. That's your job is to play Madden and then write about it. And that's who gets to do that. We got to do that stuff. That was amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy times.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, John Robinson, you are a lifelong WWE fan or pro wrestling fan in general. And for me, I'm also a big WWE fan, but I have not been enjoying like the last 5-6 years of the product outside of Black and Gold NXT, which I loved. SmackDown and Raw have been really bad for me. When do you see WWE getting better? Is it really, and I don't mean to be morbid, but a lot of guys on Twitter are like, WWE is going to suck until Vince McMahon dies and someone else takes over. I mean,
you don't have to be morbid. He can also sell it. He doesn't have to die. But
I think Ray is calling for his death.
No, I think they're just, there's obviously from people that I talk to, internally, I think there's one of those things where, they pitch ideas that sound great, but he has to approve it, right? So like the ideas, they have a writing staff, they have wrestlers who, these superstars come up with their own ideas and different gimmicks, and they get pitched and people love it. And then eventually it gets to the top and things get changed. And so, it's tough. Like I was hoping, Triple H, I think what Hunter was doing with NXT was great. I thought it was very entertaining, bringing back like war games. And, I think his vision was more of what I think people want to see. So I was hoping that his influence would kind of filter up. But, unfortunately it didn't.
Vince gave him a heart attack.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. They have pieces that I think, like I actually really like Roman Reigns and I like the Usos. But do I want to see Roman Reigns fight Brock Lesnar for the 5 millionth time at WrestleMania? Probably not. I think with the Royal Rumble, something to make new stars. Like, you could have made Riddle, right? Have him win. Something like that, which is rumored that, at one point, here's somebody they need to bring back R-rated WWE. Look at the Attitude Era. There was a lot of like terribleness in the Attitude Era, but it was must-see TV. And they gave people live mics and said, hey, go do your thing. And look at the stars that came out of that. They're still the biggest stars. And I think part of the problem is even it filters into the video game, right? Like when people look at the roster, and they put, oh, we're excited about Stone Cold and The Rock and, Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan and Ricky Steamboat and Ultimate Warrior being in the game. It's like, well, what about the current roster? Who are you excited to see out of the current roster? Even like Rey Mysterio's on the cover, right? Is Rey like a focal point? Like he's a cool character, and the cover looks sweet, with the mask and everything. But I don't know. Like it's interesting what they're doing. I don't understand it personally in terms of like the storylines. What could be and what is. It just doesn't. There's a disconnect between the office and the fans, and they just.
Is it just that Vince is too old? Is he kind of stuck in his ways?
I feel like they're stubborn. Like, oh, we didn't make this guy a star. He got, became a star on his own. Like Zack Ryder is a good example where, he was so over on his own, and then it's like they almost, and it's almost like they got mad at him for getting popular. And the old adage was always like, oh, get yourself over. So then he does, and then they get mad at him and they completely bury him.
Then they put him in a wheelchair and have Kane throw him off the stage, and he looks like an idiot.
Yeah, I mean, you had people, chanting for him, and The Rock, was out there with a mic and had to be like, "Hey, I'm a fan of his too." He had to actually like acknowledge that, they're chanting "We want Ryder" when The Rock was out there. It's tough. Like I think they do a bad job of creating new stars, so they just kind of lean on the old guys, but eventually you can't. You lean over too far, you fall over, and we've seen them fall on their face pretty hard.
And Vince, like, there's a certain body type that Vince likes. He likes the big guys. As a fan, I like the guys that can actually wrestle. I don't care how big or small they are. And he doesn't do a lot with the guys that I like. Like Shinsuke Nakamura was super over in NXT. When he first made his debut on SmackDown and Raw, crowd was totally into his entrance, and then they do nothing with him. Like they have so many guys that start off really hot, and they don't really do anything with them. The one exception I can think of is Riddle. I think Riddle's been doing great since he's been called up, even though they got rid of his first name for reasons. But if you look at a guy like Bryan Danielson, I'm a big fan of his. WWE made it really difficult for him to get over, but he got over on his own. But then they still did stupid shit with him. They wouldn't let him wrestle the way he could. Now he went over to AEW. He's killing it over there. He's having amazing matches, doing way better on the mic than I didn't ever thought he was capable of. And they just seem to have more freedom, and they take more chances in AEW. I think that's something WWE lost. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, even someone like Kofi, right? Like I love Kofi Kingston. They basically shit on his whole title reign. It's terrible. Why not make that competitive at least? Like they let other people compete against Brock. Why have him lose in a second? It's too bad.
Because he's not as big as Vince. Vince likes them.
I think Finn Balor is another great example of someone who should be. He should be on the cover of WWE 2K. He should be, the star that they should have been able to make. Like, just think if he would have beat Brock, it always comes back to Brock. I don't know why. But like, say, he had an amazing match against Brock where, a couple close falls. They made it look good. What if he actually won? Like, could they have crowned him?
Too small for Vince. Again.
Yeah.
I think he's tremendously talented. I love Finn Balor, even from before he was in WWE, when he was Prince Devitt over in Japan. Did some killer stuff. John Foster, you were talking about the work you did with Pride. So when you were over there, did you get to see like the Sakuraba era? Was that around the time?
Yeah.
Working with it?
Yeah, I didn't get to meet Sakuraba, which is too bad because I really would have liked to. I got to meet Vanderlei though, so that was nice.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he was really nice.
And if I
Although it
remember
helps when you walk around with Boss, everyone's nice to you.
right.
Right. But yeah, I was there for that. And guys like, one of the nicest guys in the world was Don Fry. And he has that terrifying look that he would give his opponents, in the ring. But he's just the most friendly dude in the world. And there was one match, he got his elbow dislocated by a judo guy named Yoshida. He didn't tap. He should have tapped. And we would all ride back on the bus back to the hotel together. It was all the fighters and me, and he was walking on and he's got his arm in a sling and he stops. He said, "Hey man, I'm sorry I didn't say hello to you before the match." I'm like, "Dude, your arm is broken." And then another guy who was really just a sweetheart was Mark the Hammer Coleman, basically almost like the inventor of ground and pound.
Yeah.
Really, really friendly guy. And one time we'd come out of the after fight event, and he had one of those giant Sapporos or something like that in his hand, and he just popped it off. And I was sitting next to him, and I said, "Man, you were smart. I should have grabbed one." Without a second thought, he gave me his beer, and then he pulled another one out of his pocket. So we just drank giant beers that he had taken from the event on the way back home. But yeah, I mean, the different nationalities kind of isolated together, like the Brazilians hung with the Brazilians, except that the different teams there was some friction there. The Japanese fighters, I think, thought we were all barbarians. And then the Russians were the Russians, this was the Fedor era too. I was there. I got to see Fedor fight Cowboy. What the hell's his name? The Texas Crazy Horse. And unfortunately, he lost. But that was what a great match. And Fedor up close, it just doesn't look like anything. He's sort of got like a little bit of moves, a little bit of a belly. He's not like a little dude, but he's not a big dude. But he just wrecked him. And I went out with a couple of journalists and with Boss, and then his team after it was the Dutch, I think, Golden Hammer team or something like that. And those guys are crazy. Dutch people are crazy. And they're all like these giant Vikings and just pounding beer after beer. We were like the Japanese equivalent of like a Howard Johnson's, and just there until like 4 or 5 in the morning, just tables full of empty beer bottles. It was amazing. But I think I just went off on a tangent.
No, I love tangents. Am I remembering correctly? Was Don Fry in a Godzilla movie, or is that another fighter? There was some fried fighter that had a small role in a Godzilla movie.
I don't remember Don Fry being in one, but that I could be wrong.
I'm probably wrong. I almost always am. But let's talk about what you guys are working on next. If you'd like to share anything, I'll let you pick who goes first.
I'll go. I have a novel coming out in April. It's going to launch at the Ghoulish Book Festival in San Antonio. And the book is titled Leech. It's about a kind of a strange secret agent named Archibald Leach, spelled differently from Cary Grant. His real name is Archibald Leach. And he investigates things when sort of the fabric of reality starts to fray. They send in Leach, but it's had a strange effect on him. And this book came about really because I had written a short story about him, and it was published in an anthology. And I wrote a couple more stories, and I belong to a writers group, all professional writers, and we critique each other's work. And everyone liked the Leach stories. Everyone thought the character was a lot of fun. And he drives a car named Bertha. He's got an alcoholic wife who's always on the phone to him. He's an interesting guy. And so I just wrote some more stories, and eventually I realized I think this is a novel. And so I contacted a publisher I'd worked with, and he said, "We'll send it over." And now it's coming out in April. So I'm excited.
For the people that are watching live, if you have any questions for John or John, please send them in. If you're watching a replay, you can send John Foster a question on Twitter
Absolutely.
at John Foster Fic, or you can send John Robinson a question at J Rob and Steele. Now, John Robinson, you mentioned
Don't bother me.
You have a much cooler Twitter handle than I do.
Because at IGN, I used to do like diaries of like creative players, and everyone called me J Rob. So I used to be the diary of J Rob and Steele, and like NCAA football or Madden or whatever. So just carried over.
So it's J, the first letter of your first name, and Rob, the first 3 letters of your last name. I might do something with that. Seems like a good gimmick.
I could have
John,
TV. I'll be here.
Can you tell us anything about the sequel for this? You mentioned it a little bit, and I know you don't want to give away too much, but if there's anything you can say, the people out there would love to hear it.
Man, yeah. It's still like I've outlined it. I started writing it a little bit, but it's in very early stages. But it's just exciting to bring the characters back. Especially like I said, Sunshine's based off a lot of characteristics of my daughter. So it's like good and bad because I'm trying to like get in her head, but trying to get in the head of a teenage girl who's your daughter. There's good and bad with trying to come up with storylines that way. But she kicks ass. She fights werewolves. So, like I said, she's got a smart mouth, and kind of takes after her dad, maybe.
Maybe there should be this thing where there's a love triangle with her, a vampire, and a werewolf.
Wow.
You like that?
I think people would buy that. I think people would read that.
And they would watch.
Yeah, luckily,
the movie.
Luckily her being 14 in the book, and kind of her best friend is 12. Kind of avoid a lot of the love story, and it, like I said, it's more like Goonies fashion, adventure, monsters fighting.
And the 4th book, that's when the love triangle kicks in.
Yeah.
She's 27. She's strung out.
She moved to LA to be an actress. Things didn't work out.
Now she's living under a bridge.
Vampire. Yeah. John Foster, you are smaller than the last time I saw you. I don't mean in a good or bad way, because I remember you used to be a pretty buff guy.
I haven't worked out since COVID. I was training Muay Thai for the last several years prior to COVID, and in the year before that, I tore. There are these little tendons that go from the top of your bicep beneath your shoulder muscle and connect to the humerus, and I tore one of those doing drills, doing heavy hook drills, and that sort of just put me out of commission. And then COVID came, and I just had no motivation. But what I did do was I lost 25 pounds during COVID. I just sort of took advantage of the fact that, cooking for myself, not going out. And I do a lot of the cooking here in the house because I like cooking. I like eating, so I make it, and then I make what I want to eat, and then I eat it. I have lost some weight. Once COVID gets done, I want to go back to the gym, but I'm 52 now. I don't want to get big. I want to stay sort of fit. So that's my goal now.
I remember you telling me when you were in your big stages and wanted to bulk up, sometimes you would just eat raw ground beef.
Oh yeah, that was when I dropped out of school when I was 19. I dropped out my first semester of college, And so I had some shitty day job, and that wasn't enough. So I got a job as a trainer at the Y. I was like teaching weightlifting classes to yuppies and stuff. And I couldn't afford, like the protein drinks or anything. I couldn't afford anything. But there was a market right near where my day job was, and they had a great high-end meat counter. And I would go in and I would just get a pound of fresh sirloin, and they would grind it right there. And I would just take it, and if it was a good day, I had stolen some salt and pepper from a McDonald's or something like that. And I would sit in the public garden in Boston and look at the plants and people watching by, and just eat raw hamburger, raw ground sirloin. And I still occasionally, you're really not supposed to unless it's really, really good stuff. But every time I'm making hamburgers or something, my dog comes over and she and I have a little bit of raw stuff before it goes. Yeah, I was all about the
If I'd have seen him in the park, I would have gave him some change or something.
I was decently dressed. I wasn't Aqualung,
So, John Foster, I'm going to tell you one of my favorite John Robinson stories.
Yes.
We were in SoCal at a video game studio, and they're taking us back to the airport, but they had to do 2 runs. And one of the kids was going to be late for his flight unless he was in the first van. So they needed someone in the van to get out. And there was a reporter that wasn't so popular. Let's call him Ron Gugliosi.
Oh, I know who he is. Yes.
So John Robinson goes, Gugliosi, this kid's going to miss his flight. Get the fuck out. It was just like random and loud and rude, and I loved it. it was fantastic.
Sometimes you got to stand up for the little guy. There's a lot of, in any business, there's a lot of like these guys that just started out. And they didn't have much clout. So like they didn't know they could like speak up, and, I felt like I had clout, and I could tell somebody to get out of the van and let this guy get his flight. There's a lot of instances like that where, people tried to like push the little guy out of interviews and stuff. And I felt like I spoke up a lot, and we're like, stop being rude to these kids,
No, and also I don't think you liked Gugliosi very much.
No, he's cool. I know. It's fine. I still talk to him.
Nice.
I just needed him to get out of the van so this poor kid could catch his flight.
There was another, we're in Chicago or Detroit or something at a wrestling event, and this kid that didn't speak at all was just like following us, and a bunch of us were just going out to a bar or something. We all get into taxis, but we leave like the mute kid on the sidewalk that was following us. No one. Where were we? Why weren't you sticking up for him then, John? He could have gotten in the taxi with us.
I don't even know what you're talking about. I probably would have. I don't remember.
See, as the PR guy, I always had to kind of make sure that the lost sheep didn't get lost.
Right.
I can remember there was one. God, I don't even remember what game it was for, but we were in the Tenderloin in San Francisco, and there was a group of people, and some of the guys were young, like early 20s, and so everyone wanted to go to a strip club. And by that point I was just like, how many strip clubs? But they want to go, so we go. And then at a certain point, I think I was coming down with something as well, and so I just wasn't into it at all. And I finally said, okay, I'm leaving. And I picked a couple of them, and I was like, and you have to come with me because you can't walk back by yourself to the hotel. I wasn't going to let them walk back.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's a lot of like dangerous situations on these trips where, people get left by themselves or had too much to drink. It's amazing there haven't been, more terrible incidents. But speaking of people getting left behind, WrestleMania in Orlando, there's a whole bus full of journalists, and Ray Padilla, RPadTV, didn't come to the bus, and the whole bus of journalists was like, leave Ray, because they knew. And the PR girl for THQ was like, I'm gonna go. They searched like the parking lot for Ray, and I think he might have had a few too many beers or something and couldn't find the bus, or was just
That never
wandering
happened.
off. But eventually he came and we all applauded. But yeah, there was a big contingent of people wanting to leave him in Orlando. Yeah, but he made it back.
There was a guy that Ray will know, and I won't say his name, but he'll know by the description. He smoked cigarettes from a cigarette holder, and he was at a certain thing that it rhymes with slappy yuppie, and he was essentially unconscious on the bus. Everyone was off the bus, and we were in New York, and I realized that he was still there. And he kept trying to let me. He wanted me to just let him go to sleep on the bus, and the bus driver's like, he has to get off the bus. And I'm like, dude, I'm gonna get him off the bus. But he was done. He was done. Somehow we managed to get him up and just mobile enough to get him off the bus. But
I forgot about that guy until you mentioned him. I haven't thought about him in years. But we flew to Japan together. And he had bought a bottle of Jack Daniels duty free, and he was drinking it on the plane.
ouch.
So he's hammered by the time we land. He gets off the plane. First thing he does is he lights up a cigarette inside the airport. All these really polite Japanese people are trying to tell him that he can't smoke in here, and then he's just like, whatever. Well, and I actually got detained for not having a journalist visa.
Really?
So I'm in some little room, but it was kind of disappointing because I wanted it to have like 2 chairs and a table, and like I'm in handcuffs.
Right? Yeah. Right, yeah.
And I'd be smoking through the handcuffs. But yeah, they held me up for not having a journalist visa, and my drunk ass boss is somewhere in the airport. And
Jesus Christ.
The only place I ever got detained was at the Canadian airport for some reason in Vancouver. Like I got off the flight and they escorted me in like this room, and there were all these people and they're like hardcore questioning me like what I was trying to do in Vancouver. And I was like, I'm going to EA to interview Dwayne Wade, and they're like, we don't believe you. And like literally Dwayne Wade gets off a plane and like goes walking by, and I was like, there he is right there. Go ask him. Like, and yeah, I spent like an hour for some reason detained in Vancouver, and they never told me why. And then they finally just let me go.
Were you in a little room with handcuffs and an overhead lamp?
They didn't cuff me, but it was a small room, and they had like a lot of people like in the room questioning me. And then when the main question people left, there was like a guard like staring me down, just standing there. I was like, I thought Canadians were supposed to be welcoming. I didn't know.
They got like the 6 mean Canadians, and they put them at customs at Vancouver.
I was like, don't you know? I know the Heart Foundation. Let me go.
That's right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up, guys. I want to thank you so much for joining me. Congratulations on all your success as authors. You guys are killing it out there.
Thank you.
Don't forget to follow John Robinson on Twitter at jrobinsteele, although he said not to bother him too much. Sunshine and the Full Moon is available now. I'll post some links in the description and on my website. And you can follow John Foster at John Foster Fic on Twitter. He has latest book is Rooster. These are 2 excellent books made by 2 excellent people. And finally, don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and all that good stuff. And stay tuned. We'll be back on Wednesday, going to go early in the morning with John Radoff, CEO of Beamable, who's going to tell me what the metaverse is and why we all should care. We will see you next time. Thanks.